Mazda 3 BM structurally outdated, the Z6 engine with a volume of 1.6 liters haunts the Mazda 3 to this day. There are few questions about the reliability of the unit. And where will they come from with such a terribly simple design, worked out in production for decades? With proper care, which is rare among motorists today, the resource may well allow you to drive 400,000 kilometers without replacing the piston and capital of the cylinder head. The sores of the engine remained old, worn out by the forums inside and out, among which is a relatively weak engine mount, which is indicated by excessive vibrations at idle. The damper for changing the length of the intake manifold can also tap harmlessly. If you suddenly decide to deal with a crash, it will not be superfluous to change the gasket at the junction of the collector with the cylinder head, since it did not distinguish itself with reliability, because of its damage, the revolutions start dancing. The 1.6 motor and interventions in the timing mechanism are required only with a run of 150 TkM, when in a good way it is necessary to adjust the valve clearances for the first time. Against the backdrop of the new Mazda 3 BM engines, the Z6 unit looks the most reliable, but the reason for its appearance in the new generation is most likely financial, holding back the starting price. Which of the young will like the fact that domestic wrecks go around it at the traffic light? Take Skyactiv. In addition, Skyactiv motors are not as bad as some publications present, but more and more their behavior in everyday use resembles products that are not the most kosher for our conditions. VAG. First of all, this concerns their demands on the quality of liquids and consumable parts. The increased compression ratio, direct injection have led to the fact that the Mazda 3 of the BM generation digests the fuel afar from all gas stations and will make you take full responsibility for the choice and timing of oil changes than the old Z6. Refueling with low-quality fuel will lead to constant cleaning of injectors and replacement of ignition coils. And the most dangerous thing that can happen to any engine at all is detonation. That's what you need to protect Skyactiv from. By the way, candles also directly affect the resource. Usually they live at least 60 TkM, and it is simply impossible to put something other than the original iridium ones here. Get your wallet ready. Many owners note increased vibration during the operation of the Skyactiv engine, and no matter how much they change gasoline, supports, flush the fuel system, there is still no solution to the problem, however, as well as consequences that would certainly help to sort out the problem. One way or another, no cases of early wear of the piston without the help of the owner have yet been noted, and we can say with confidence that the resource of Skyactiv units is at least 250 TkM. Of the most serious costs during this time, perhaps, will be the replacement of the chain, which lasts about 150,000 kilometers in general. When looking for a used car, you don't need to avoid units of 1.5 and 2.0 liters, you just should not spare money for the right maintenance, which was allowed by old engines. Mazda 3 6-speed gearboxes of the third generation unexpectedly pleased with their trouble-free operation. If we forget the first reviews due to defective torque converters, then the Skyactiv drive automatic transmission for new engines is very reliable. Shocks when switching from first to second is a normal phenomenon, but only if the engine has been started recently and the oil in the automatic transmission is still cold. If the disease manifests itself after warming up, then proceed to reset the adaptations and change the firmware. In most cases, it solves the problem. An oil change in a 6-speed automatic transmission is recommended every 60 TkM if you do not want the control valves to wedged with natural wear products. A 4-speed automatic, which is available only with a 1.6 engine and a mechanical transmission, has not puzzled anyone yet. However, periodically updating the fluid in these gearboxes is also not a superfluous procedure. The only thing that annoys the owners of the Matryoshka at the manual transmission is a rather weak clutch, which rarely reaches the 150-kilometer milestone, and sometimes gives up before the end of the warranty period. The Mazda 3 BM Cove joint anthers do not live long either. A trifle, you say? Chassis type Mazda 3 BM familiar to the Golf class, front McPherson, rear multi-link suspension. That is, the design has not changed, but the suppliers of parts are clearly not the ones that used to complete the matryoshka in the back of BL. Owners primarily complain about the instability of the quality of shock absorbers. The original may not endure even 20,000 kilometers startup oil, or it can drive more than 100 TkM. And all on the same machine. So after the warranty, it is more expedient to switch to high-quality substitutes. Otherwise, the chassis of the third-generation Mazda 3 behaves quite normally for a Japanese car. The stabilizer struts and rear silent blocks of the front levers, which hold about 100,000 kilometers, are the first to draw attention to themselves. Everything is like its predecessor. The rear part of the chassis does not require a very expensive overhaul for a long time. With a good attitude towards the car, silent blocks are ready to serve more than 200 TkM. But this does not mean that you can forget about the service. If you do not periodically revise and lubricate the rear breakup bolts, then such a banal procedure as setting the wheel alignment angles can one day be very expensive. Some owners of the already not very tall matryoshkas unwittingly joined the BPAN culture. But not completely, partially. The reason was the instability of the quality of the suspension springs, one of which, during normal operation, can suddenly lose half a turn. Someone treats this with humor, like "and you don't need to cut," and someone contemptuously believes that the butting of spare parts along the road is closer to the Russian classics than to the Japanese auto industry. Particularly attentive noticed that the proportion of "Made in China" inscriptions on Mazda 3 parts has increased significantly. Knowing how things are in the Middle Kingdom with metallurgy, it is not surprising that other malfunctions also occur. For example, the rear brake mechanisms suffer from excessively rapid souring, which is why many are faced with the problem of uneven wear and overheating of the discs, especially in the rear, where, in addition to the guides and caliper pistons, the parking brake mechanism can also wedge. There were no problems with body corrosion of the Mazda 3 BM. Chips on metal panels, of course, are covered with a reddish film, but the matter does not go beyond this. Owners are more concerned about the cost of body parts, which is why it is not only scary to get into an accident, but also to approach cars from the front so as not to get a pebble on a precious windshield. A big plus for driving accuracy. In the weak door stops, the predecessor in the BL body is also recognized, as if the Mazda 3 did not change the generation at all. After 2 or 3 years of operation, the fixation of the provisions comes to naught. It turns out that this is such a congenital sore that is easy to cure, but no one needs it, especially the manufacturer. It is difficult to find the owner of the third-generation matryoshka who would not encounter a failure of the mirror folding drive, or rather unfolding. According to users, plastic drive gears usually break only at the moment when you need to go somewhere. Insidious beauty. Even during our test drive of the Mazda 3 BM in 2013, it was clear that the advanced lateral support of the front seats would not last long during intensive use. It would sag and sag. And so it happened, especially for those who are not too concerned about being overweight. Do you hear? Mazda for young fit sports people. For everyone else, there is a Corolla with an Octavia. Nobody at all expected that the steering wheel would also be added to the seats, which, by 40,000, looks 100%, but not points, but thousands of kilometers. Therefore, the determination of mileage by these two signs will be erroneous if their wear resistance is not taken into account. For pickers, this is big news. Extraneous noise in Mazda is normal. Crickets are not shy about expensive-looking materials, and by 100 TkM, if nothing is done, they steadily settle in the cabin. Fans of rich configurations will sooner or later be disappointed in premium Bose acoustics. The membrane breaks and the speakers begin to wheeze disgustingly. Electrically, the Mazda 3 BM behaves like a typical Japanese. Nothing breaks without the force majeure of the user. Problems with the behavior of the multimedia system, or, more simply, glitches, are solved by a banal flashing at the dealer, and the tablet in the panel no longer turns off for no reason. Complete renunciation of Ford, a new platform, fresh units, but the target audience is still the same young people who love, appreciate, but do not know how to care for and drive. Expensive service in the official service and high prices for spare parts have added to the fact that the used car market has a lot of Mazda 3 BM in a technically neglected state, a lot of broken and simply unkempt cars. In general, the Matryoshka has remained relatively reliable and unpretentious, but the search for a good option will definitely be delayed, unless, of course, you are very lucky. It makes no sense to dissuade you from specific versions of the third-generation Mazda 3. All units have a decent resource, and with proper care, a car with a mileage of 100 TkM passes at least the same amount without serious costs. However, we will make one digression. If your city does not have high-quality gasoline and good services, then Skyactiv versions are contraindicated for you, otherwise the risk of running into serious problems will be almost 100%. Due to Mazda's price policy for parts and extremely poor theft protection, the BM Trio leaves their rightful owners often and quickly. In this regard, we recommend that you familiarize yourself with the check of Mazda 3 BM forensic markings so as not to run into a criminal car.